This is the lecture for Chapter 8 of Walzer's Just and Unjust Wars. So, just one point to make. It's a pretty basic point that's easy to grasp if you look at the chapter as a whole and sort of step back, but you can maybe miss it if you're just like going page by page and trying to understand each individual idea. And so, it helps to have the point in mind before you read. The goal in this chapter is to contrast two ways of understanding the war convention, sort of where is the war convention coming from, like how is it justified? And basically, the two options are utilitarianism and something based on rights, human rights. And so utilitarianism is the idea that we should do whatever promotes the best consequences, and specifically, the best consequences are the ones that kind of promote the most happiness or the most pleasure or something. And so the thought is if you're a utilitarian, you think we should do whatever leads to the best results. And so part of this chapter is devoted to thinking about how the utilitarian could justify the war convention. How does the utilitarian understand the rules of war? What would utilitarian reasoning support in terms of rules of war? And then, as you see when you get to the end of the utilitarian section, Walzer thinks it's sort of not sufficient. Utilitarianism is not sufficient to justify the war convention. We have to have more than utilitarianism, and maybe utilitarianism is not even a big part of the war convention. It doesn't provide enough support to sort of get us the contents of the war convention. And so that's the sort of one main thrust of the chapter, which is to evaluate utilitarianism as an explanation for the war convention and reject it. And then he turns to what he thinks is a better source, which is human rights. And so human rights are the idea that, people have rights in virtue of being human, and it's not justifiable to violate their rights, except perhaps in certain limited circumstances. And so you can understand that utilitarianism and rights are sort of conflicting because utilitarianism says we should do whatever gets the best consequences. And sometimes it'll give us the best consequences if we violate someone's human rights. But if we think that someone has rights, then we think that their rights shouldn't be violated, period. And that includes their rights should not be violated, even if this would lead to good consequences. So utilitarianism and human rights are sort of like conflicting positions. And what Walzer is doing in this chapter is suggesting that the latter position, human rights, is a better way of understanding the basis of the war convention than utilitarianism.